August meeting of the Public Market Advisory Commission. It's 5:32, and we will begin with our roll call.
All right, Commissioner Cassiari.
Here.
Commissioner Wolf.
Here.
Commissioner Young.
Here.
And Commissioners Parker and Nemeth are not present.
Next, we'll have approval of the agenda.
Oh, that's me.
Motion for approval?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And now we will open up to our first public commentary.
Yes, please. And please say your full name and how you're affiliated.
Okay.
For the record.
My name is Christine Shupry. I am an daily artisan vendor at the farmers market. I've been a faithful market vendor for nearly 25 years. I have seen vendors come and go, watch the market decline and then surge, and eventually start to change with the times. However, I wish to bring up an area of concern that hasn't changed with the time and continues to go unaddressed, and that is the unfair practice of daily artisan seniority in regard to stall allocation. As a longtime daily artisan vendor, I have continually witnessed growers/producers who have attended the market for less than 5 years move past artisans with more seniority and be awarded a permanent stall while we remain stuck in limbo and are moved further down the list of those who have yet to receive a permanent stall assignment. Our concerns continue to be ignored. Did I mention I've been a vendor for almost 25 years? The market policies currently favor growers/producers over artisans. And let me clarify the term producer for you as defined by the Oxford Dictionary. A person, company, or country that makes, grows, or supply goods or commodities for sale. I'm a producer with goods for sale. My sales at this market are a source of my income. I follow the same rules as growers. However, when it comes to stall allocation, there are separate rules for growers/producers and artisans, and the us against them mentality continues to prevail. I am here to attest that separate is not equal. We, the daily artisans, are in the minority and are not treated fairly. In fact, I believe we are being discriminated against. This is a public market, not just a farmer's market. It is meant to serve the populace of Ann Arbor, a supposedly progressive community, and it is time to have the market rules updated or amended to promote inclusivity and allow for the fair treatment and allocation of stalls for all market vendors. The market is changing, the times are changing, and now is the time to address this issue. I have also copied this, and I have attached a City of Ann Arbor resolution, Resolution 18-324. I'm going to read a small bit of that. And it says, it is the intent of the city that no individual be denied equal protection of the laws, nor shall any individual be denied the enjoyment of his or her civil or political rights, or be discriminated against because of actual or perceived age, arrest record, color, disability, educational association, familial status, family responsibilities, gender expression, gender identity, genetic information, height, HIV status, marital status, national origin, political beliefs, race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, source of income, veteran status, victim of domestic violence, stalking, or weight. I think it's Article 9153, discriminatory public accommodation practices. No person shall discriminate in making available full and equal access to all goods, services, activities, privileges, and accommodations of any place of public accommodation. I think that fits us. We are part of the public market. We are a vendor, and it seems as though the practices between growers and artisans are separate but not equal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thanks.
I can give you the other numbers that I referenced, but if you Google this ordinance, it has what I was just talking about.
Okay,
I think that's the agenda.
Oh, They've stapled them all together.
We can share them
That's
too.
the agenda.
Okay, we can share our
Okay.
copy, yeah.
No, I thought I had enough for everyone.
No, thank you.
So you have one?
Yep,
Yep.
got one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we will move on to our,
Are there any other,
I'm sorry?
are there any other public
Oh,
comment?
yeah. No. I assumed, sorry, Becky. We'll move on to our approval of the minutes from the July meeting.
I move to approve.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And presentations, there are none. And we'll move on to our regular business. First up is the market infrastructure working document.
Thank you. So after our last meeting, when we just kind of started to explore this question of, and just to reiterate, the question is, what can we do in the interim period, sort of while we are waiting to hear back about further funding for the market infrastructure project, which is still our main intent, to build the building. What can we as a committee be doing to move things forward? And we had talked about, one, looking into possible sources of funding, and two, looking into both alternatives that might be a little more affordable, and also things that we can do in addition to that will help winterize the market and accomplish our goals. So I put together a working document to kind of organize our thoughts, which is included in your packet, as well as just for our reference, the layout of the building, the current building plan. It doesn't, directly pertain maybe to what we would talk about, but I just thought it could be useful to see an overhead layout of the map. To remind you, I know we've, seen these before, but to look back on since we are kind of revisiting this. So the working document, outlining our discussion before, I had gone back and wanted to look at what were our goals and concerns, general goals and concerns that we had identified at the beginning, and that the vendor operating committee and the community operating committee had identified as important when talking about these changes. And, we had identified parking and the need to identify other parking solutions is very important. These examples that had been brought up were loading zones, other nearby parking lots that we could lease, and, keeping in mind also parking on site if possible. Another was the number of vendors and any new improvement will benefit. So, how many people is this going to affect? Is it affecting everyone? Is it only affecting a few? And then the ease of loading and unloading. So as we're thinking about improvements to our infrastructure, I think some of the things that had been brought up were, different zones for loading and unloading, a staggered time period for vendors to load and unload, and this had also been discussed. So I think, these were nice to kind of just look back on as we thought about things. Are these solutions answering some of these questions? And I don't know if there's anything else we want to add to the list at this time that you can think of offhand. It's kind of general. Okay. Commissioner Young was actually going to do a little research and look at the market as a historical entity. So I was wondering if you had any updates?
Just a little bit of history. I had thought the structure, I'd heard that it was a WPA project. It indeed was. I put together a bunch of documents from just looking at the online resources from the Ann Arbor District Library. Interestingly, the original project was to pave the area. The land was donated by a former mayor, I think, yes. Gottlieb Luke, his picture's out there. It had been part of his lumber company. And there was a need for pavement because there were several reports of lots of mud where the market was, and then building the metal beams with a corrugated roof. And in the Ann Arbor District Library records, the articles, there's actually a picture of the construction of the roof. So I don't know if that's going to be useful, probably not for any engineering concerns. But the other thing that was interesting is the original project was $21,000. WPA paid for half and the city paid for the other half. There was approval in '38 and then it was completed around 1940. And there was a brick building that was for the office, for meat inspection, and a comfort station. So I think it's where the vendors often sat and had snacks and things like that. So, so that's sort of what I found out about that general area, just in thinking of the possibility of this being a centennial of the market. There's another historic article that was done by the Ann Arbor News in 1968, and there's lots of nice pictures of vendors and interviews with vendors that had been coming to the market for decades. So capturing some of that early market history, including before it moved to the current location, since it started originally in 1919, and then expanded to be too big, and that's when it came to the current location in the 1930s. So that's just what I have. I tried to do a little bit of research on historic preservation in Ann Arbor to see if there was any funding. I didn't have much time. I didn't find any good resources. So if that's an avenue we want to follow for anything, I'm happy to talk to local historians. So
great, thank you for looking into that. Okay, so next we had talked about this kind of transitions as well, actually, I think, into the next subject, which was, are there other grants or funding sources out there that might be potential sources to help us with this project that we hadn't explored before? And first of all, to answer the question that was asked about what's the process for city government working with foundations? And I think, everyone is individual and specific, but I think the first question is, what is the foundation's policy? So there's nothing that really precludes us from working with an agency like a foundation, but the first question is, I think, kind of what are their policies, and then going from there to see if we fit their needs. So you are going to research look into the Ann Arbor Community Foundation. Thank you. Do you have any updates?
I do, yeah. So I did contact, so one of the intents was, could there be a possibility for something like a Friends of the Ann Arbor Farmers Market organization to create, which would then collect funds and could help to push this forward. And so one group in Ann Arbor is Ann Arbor Community Foundation. I contacted them and they recommended that they do different kinds of projects. So that's not a good fit for them. But there's another organization in Ann Arbor called the Now Foundation, which is essentially helps not-for-profit start and also acts as their fiduciary representative, essentially. So provides a lot of the legal and financial infrastructure for this, so you don't have to set that all up yourself. And they also do have a number of workshops starting in the next few months of like how to design art, what's appropriate, what's not, how does that thing work. So essentially establishing those rules. And in talking with the people at the Now Foundation, they had they seemed like it was possible, but they also, it's kind of the chicken and the egg in terms of they kind of want to know what our plans are in terms of how to work with the city and how to, so they kind of want to know what the city wants and the city. So it's a little bit, so there's an opportunity to dovetail those things together. There's also was a question too as to who was actually going to run it and who's going to set that up. And if that's like me, then that may promote, I may have a conflict of interest in the sense of if I'm on the board and also running that, then that may not work. But I can research it and I can figure that out. So it'd be useful from you too to see if there are other people in the community who might also be interested in leading that. And I can help kind of liaise with them, but I can't necessarily be that person.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yep.
Welcome, Commissioner Nemeth. Hi. Yes, thanks for coming. No, we appreciate it. We're just kind of doing updates on what we've been able to look into and research from last meeting. So just to clarify, this would be to set up a Friends of the Ann Arbor Farmers Market organization that is a nonprofit.
That's right.
So that is separate from the Ann Arbor Farmers Market.
That's
in
right.
The city.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it would essentially be a fundraising arm, which could then collect as a not-for-profit status for fundraising for, and ideally, the more specific, the better, is what they were saying too. So if it is specifically for, a building versus if it's a slush fund versus if it's, those are different layers, and we need to figure out what do we want and and so this is where working those two things together of what would really be helpful, what would be supportive.
Right.
And that's I think a fruitful dialogue, and also I'm sure the city will be interested in
Yes,
contributing to
absolutely.
that too. So
Good. Well, I think it's worth pursuing and researching further. If
Yep, I
that
will.
is something you
Yep.
are willing to do, that would be great.
absolutely,
I can go back and look into, try to get a little more details on, okay, we're thinking about like Friends of the Ann Arbor Farmers Market, like this was suggested to us.
yep,
What could that look like? and what are
exactly. And
possibilities?
part of it too is identifying both what the requirements are from the city viewpoint and what we want, but also identifying a number of people who would
Yeah,
kind of play the leadership role within that, who would be independent.
okay. Okay, well, I think your point about figuring out more specifically kind of what we want makes sense. And I mean, if there is anyone we kind of know of, that's great, but also like before doing an ask
Yeah.
or like,
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
what are we asking for?
What are you asking for?
Good, so yeah, I mean, if you could look into the Now Foundation and look into that,
I
that
will.
would be fantastic.
Great.
Okay, thank you. I think if anyone has time and wants to do further research, I think another thing that would be useful is to look into how have other farmers markets funded their infrastructure projects. What are examples out there of where funding has come from? So,
And actually, one question too is for the city, for the Parks Foundation, have they done anything through the parks? Are there any other things that have a public, not-for-profit connection for a specific park or some specific piece of infrastructure? I don't remember seeing any in particular, but that doesn't mean they haven't happened.
I think that I asked that in our meeting with Derek and Josh, and it seemed like no, most projects have been just,
Pure
Parks
city.
and Recreation funds.
yeah, I think
city
that's
funds, yeah.
I think that's
It was
right.
sort
I
of
couldn't say for
uncharted
sure, but-
territory when we were talking to them about it, but, that doesn't mean that, it's not a possibility. It just hasn't been done.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Was my impression.
Okay, and then I think the final category I sort of have listed here are some of the ideas we had thrown out last meeting. And I would like to say, well, I think a good possible use of our time going forward in the next couple months would be to focus on research and further define and be a little more specific about a couple ideas we want to explore. And then kind of bringing that back so we can get more concrete, like estimates, that kind of thing. But yeah, some of the things that had been brought up last time were just simple, like radiators and heaters for winter. Like simple improvements probably wouldn't be too costly, but would make a big difference. That can be added kind of easily. Yeah, like I said, such as the radiators and heaters. Another one that had been looked into before was the shed idea on the current infrastructure, like pull down doors, something to block the wind, especially. One thought that I had was I can go back and maybe find the original company that did that, or Alex and I had been talking, and we thought maybe I could go back and find the original company that had done that estimate for us and that bid and the plan, and see maybe we could get back in touch with them and ask some questions like why was this the model you used, and that kind of thing would be helpful. But I also think that, again, looking into examples from other farmers markets and doing some research there could be helpful. Are there any other structures that kind of look like something we might be looking for?
And yeah, I think, you know, if I were to articulate one of the goals for me of this endeavor is, you know, we still have the approved site plan for this project that Sarah initiated, which Parks and Recreation told us they want to put out for bid again next spring, just to try it again at the right timing for construction.
Or reassess, like they're gonna reassess if it's possible to put back out for bid, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Right, yeah.
next spring.
Right.
And so when we met, I kind of felt like, well, I would like to do something productive in the meantime, in the interim, right? Because, you know, the two bids came in really high. It's kind of hard to believe that much will have changed in a year.
It'll probably be worse.
Right, it'll probably be worse, unfortunately. So what are, you know, some more economical solutions that kind of, you know, check at least some of the boxes that we're hoping to get checked off, you know, shelter in the winter, creating more stall space, you know, if it creates more parking, great, you know, that's, you know, sort of a hard thing to do. But so, you know, I'm happy to do some research of different structures out there. And yes, also go back to the feasibility study that Sarah did. You know, that was I think that was a big sort of sticking point, was that, you know, there's this idea to drop down walls, and maybe you were around on the commission at this time. There was this idea to drop down walls on the existing stalls. And so Sarah, you know, initiated a feasibility study with an engineer who said, well, the current stalls can't bear any weight. They're just not engineered to do that. So I think that's why the whole project shifted towards, you know, this new building in the Sandlot area, which was open and undeveloped and could just be built from the ground up. But maybe going back to that study and saying, okay, well, what would it look like to reinforce the existing stalls in order to put down walls?
One thing that I had thought about after we had our discussion last week was, if you actually think about how a garage door works, the existing structure would not have to bear any support of this door at all. In other words, you would put new posts down for the garage door, and that would bear the weight of the garage door. And then that's where your door would come up, and then at the top they just have, it's kind of like a push broom type deal where it just, you know, the door would rub up against that, like a door sill, and there wouldn't be any weight at all on the existing structure.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot of different options that I don't think that it was really,
Explored.
whoever looked into it, I don't think they really put a whole lot of, you know, the contractor I'm talking about, whoever did that, didn't put a whole lot of looking into, you know, for all that. So I just think there's a lot of options there for that to still happen.
Yeah, I know, I had the same thing too. I remember that hearing about the study and kind of asking about where that was or what the result was of that, because it seemed kind of like it was very quickly dismissed, and then it's like, but wait, that still seems to have some sense to it.
Yeah.
But the reasoning seemed pretty cut and dry, like, oh, no, this is just, and it's like, I don't know, I'm not sure. So I'd be curious to see that too. And
Yeah,
I think they're,
I think it's hard since none of us were part of that conversation, so.
and the other thing too is that, and that is a super common way other markets have successfully done this, is with some sort of roll down, either garage door style or even just roll down like plastic. And that those vary from expensive to not so expensive to fancy to not so fancy. Even if you look at a farm tech catalog and look at a roll down side of a hoop house, and you can do that pretty cheaply, and it's pretty light, and it's pretty sustainable actually.
People enclose porches too with just clear vinyl
Yeah,
curtains.
exactly, yeah.
I was thinking, what you said about the rings, I'd never
Yeah.
noticed the rings, but even just clipping curtains onto those in the winter could be easy to do and wouldn't, I don't think they'd add that much weight to the structure. I mean, it's not gonna weigh that much more than the plants that are hanging from those rings.
Right. I think the heat would be, like, if we had to pick a spot to start, my personal opinion would be with like the radiant heat. And then once that's there, you know, and then after that, you know, we could look at different option of how we're gonna keep the wind out. And that would be the easier part, and, you know, the heat would probably be the most costly part of this whole project.
You're suggesting radiant heat in the floor?
No,
Oh.
overhead.
Oh.
They have these tube heaters, I'm sure you've seen them in barns before, and what they are is they're radiant heat, so they heat objects.
Right.
So they don't heat the air, they'd heat like the concrete and
things.
everything, and just standing underneath it, it heats you. So even if you're standing underneath it and the wind's blowing, you still get warmth from it,
Yeah.
so.
Would you be willing to maybe look into some examples of heat, like radiant heat
Absolutely.
and that kind of thing, and maybe bring that back to the commission? And then
Yeah.
I also think if anyone has time to research, it sounds like there's a lot of directions we could look into for wind blockage. I think that would be very helpful.
As far as the radiant heat goes, I can come up with several different options to show you guys so we all are on the same page. Is there any preference as far as, I know they have the solar panels on the roof there. You can go electric, you can go natural gas, you know, is there any particular?
I think, well, I was going to say this a few minutes ago. From one big thing I took out of our meeting with Parks and Recreation is that a big concern is the maintenance cost of any new improvement on a Parks and Rec structure, because it's a major liability, you know, it's a lifelong of maintenance. And so, you know, I don't know if they maybe want to conduct a study of, you know, extrapolated maintenance costs of different systems.
The gas would be definitely the lowest maintenance, and it'd be the cheapest to install. I know that because I've looked into them for my own barn.
Yeah.
But I didn't know, I was just asking because I know that with the whole green thing and the solar
Right.
panels, I didn't know if there'd be maybe some kind of grant for going with electricity or something. You know, I don't know how all that works.
Yeah.
well, if it were with the electricity, it'd probably be with a heat pump would be the most overall efficient, but I've never heard of a
Right,
radiant
but-
heater with a heat pump.
Yeah, that's
So
not gonna,
Yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't get the temperature.
too much
so-
concrete and
Yeah.
asphalt down
Yeah.
there for that.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I guess basically I don't have an answer for that. I'm not sure. So maybe a little of each if you see a good
Yep.
model.
Okay, I can get some literature together and
That would be
make
awesome.
copies for everybody.
Thank you.
Stephanie, one question. We've been thinking a lot about winterizing, and I was actually wondering if part of the argument for doing these improvements is for increased use of the market for things that structure beyond the actual farmer's market, because I know there's been some weddings there. You said you have an event tonight, and if there can be heat and maybe some wind blockage, can that also be an argument that that space can be more multifunctional for the city as well?
I think that does lend to our argument. Yeah, I think that helps for sure. Yeah.
Now, I guess that I have another question since she brought that up. The money that is raised when that's rented, that goes to Parks and Recs, correct?
Oh,
Like if someone has a wedding there?
right.
Okay,
That's all, I'm not sure how the rent is exactly where that is allocated, but it is rented through Parks and Rec.
Okay. So does that money get put in a special fund for improvements for that structure? Or is that money being spent on other structures throughout Parks and Recs?
I don't think it goes into like a special fund for
Gotcha.
the market itself. Yeah, not that I'm aware of. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not sure how it's allocated, but I don't believe, like, the market does actually have its own fund, its own savings, basically, which is kind of unique to the market. A lot of other parks do not have something like that, which is great because it kind of gives us the ability to do a lot of things or fix a lot of things that we might not have. But I don't think that is added to by renting the space out.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right, and I think the final thing that we had discussed about maybe exploring more, when you had brought up this, does it make sense to go back and look at less costly solutions? And I think one of our main concerns was extending that middle aisle to make it more kind of equal for those vendors that do end up in the middle, and customer traffic to be more equally, hopefully around the whole market. So is that something like a final, maybe third path we want to look into ideas for?
Yeah. Well, I guess I envision, and we talked about this before, but I envisioned those projects to be complementary to each other. And so I saw this problem where there's stalls in what was formerly the sand lot, now is a parking lot, which don't have, shelter from the sun, and they don't have electricity or water like other stalls do. So could we extend, I think one of the biggest costs of the original building design that Sarah came up with was leveling the grade, because there's a significant grade change. And then there was this big step up on the 4th Street end of the design. So rather, my thinking going back was, well, why don't we just extend the center aisle in a step-down design, much like the Carytown side of the aisle, the stalls sort of step down, but then engineer it such that we could do these drop-down sides that we had imagined, at least on the new section to start, and then go back and maybe reinforce or bolster the older sections of the stall to also carry those same sides and be contiguous. So that was my thinking. And then you kind of kill two birds with one stone. Well, you solve the summer solution of, providing more stall space. It would keep the new parking spaces, which are there now too, on the north side of that area, but then also offer at least the starting of a possibility to enclose in the winter with a new structure that's strong enough. And then, but then these are questions for a builder or engineer, but that was my thinking, so.
Okay. Yeah, good. So I think, like I said, kind of the next phase would be pulling in an engineer or a builder who might be able to tell us if these things are possible. So once we have kind of these ideas together, going to that phase, I think makes sense, which might be something we want to do when I'm back in like November or something. But in the meantime, I'd love to kind of come back when, I should introduce and mention Becky Locke will be taking over and running commission meetings while I'm out, so we can continue to meet and possibly bring ideas and further explore and define these. And I kind of foresee that maybe being a good route for this group to take in the next 2 months. And then maybe, like I said, phase 2, pulling in an engineer or getting more specific in the winter, if everyone likes that plan. Okay, great. Good. Anything else on this? Okay, thanks. That's good.
Now we will move on to the market manager report.
Okay, so this isn't on here, but yeah, as I mentioned, my last day is Saturday, so I'll be out for until the end of October is the plan. And Rebecca Locke will be kind of handling market things while I am out, and she's great, and she's agreed to kind of carry on these meetings, so hoping to continue in September and October. And also, if you need to contact the market, we're still, very available and questions, and I think you all have her contact info. Okay, great. Some things for this month. Surveys. Last year around this time, we had all discussed the customer and vendor surveys, what questions we want to answer, how yearly, like kind of a yearly report, what should go into there. And so we're kind of starting to plan for that this year, right now. But there's nothing specific planned for for a bit, but that's on our minds. Operations stall move up was August 11th. There were 14 spaces open. 7 daily vendors received permanent stalls and became annual vendors. And then the other half of the stalls go to annual vendors who want to add an additional stall permanently. What has happened, now this is the second year, is that not all of the spaces have been filled by annual vendors wanting to add a third spot. So that is something I think we will be looking into and trying to decide what do we do with these stalls that are kind of left over after this process is complete, because we don't really have a procedure or precedent for that. Fifth in Detroit construction is continuing. It's supposed to end in November. We've been sending out a weekly update, and they are currently working on the bump out area along 5th and Detroit Street, and you can see kind of a picture of what it's supposed to look like in the end, which I gave you guys when the project was starting out, but it's kind of more real now, and they should be finishing up around the market, except for landscaping, and flipping to the other side by the end of this month is the hope. So that will make loading and unloading a lot easier, and storage. Maintenance, we are starting to look into bids for replacing the gutters and also making it less costly to fix them when they get hit. And the stalls were power washed. Yay. Events, the market is 99 years old. Yes, it is, talk about historical. And next year is our 100th year, so I think we're going to try to do a big thing for that. The Ann Arbor Symphony Orchestra came and did an instrument petting zoo for kids. And we kind of celebrated our birthday, so that was fun. Food truck rallies, continue to be well attended. We had 15 mobile food vendors this past one in August. Continuing the cooking demos once a month, and food gatherers will be at market this August 25th. Talking about our relationship, last year vendors donated over 50,000 pounds of produce in 1 year to food gatherers. So just also collecting from customers who want to kind of support them as well. They'll be at market doing that. That's all I have.
All right. Now we will open up for our second public comment period.
My name is Christine Schubrein. I am a daily artisan vendor. I have a great suggestion for what you can do with those spaces that people didn't want. How about assigning them to daily artisan vendors that have been at the market for longer than 20 years? I also want to say that I'm a city resident. I support the market not only as a vendor, but as a patron. I've done it for years. I'm excited about the improvements. I appreciate that you guys are taking into consideration ways to make the market better. I hope that you take my concerns into consideration because you are a public market advisory commission. And I will also be sending my concerns to council. I hope that you will also communicate with city staff and let them know what my concerns are, and I appreciate the job that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, looks like we're ready to adjourn.
Great. Thank you.
Okay,
And then,
the time, it's 6:12.
okay.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.